Hey guys, tonight we're diving into a story that sounds almost too simple to be worth retelling. Yet here you are, brushing your teeth, fluffing your pillows, and letting me whisper in your ears about lettuce. Yes, lettuce. The leafy green you probably toss into a salad bowl without thinking twice. But in the ancient world, the Greeks believed it held mysterious powers, not just for your stomach, but for your entire state of being. Imagine someone serving you a plate of leafy greens at a party, not because they want to stay healthy, but because they're hoping you'll quietly nod off and stop singing off-key after too much wine. That's the world we're heading into tonight. And honestly, if someone told you your fate depended on lettuce, you'd probably laugh. But in the old days, you wouldn't be laughing. You'd be chewing. Slowly, sleepily, like it was your destiny. You know, back then, life was harsh. Wars, famines, plagues. No Netflix, no soft memory foam mattress, and let's be real, without caffeine or electricity, you probably wouldn't last 2 hours in their sandals. Seriously, you'd be a historical footnote, a stranger from the future who collapsed at sundown. You wouldn't survive, my friend, not without your precious air conditioning and late-night snacks. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. Because there's something magical about knowing you're lying there, maybe in New York at midnight or in a quiet little town at dawn, while I'm talking about lettuce and dreams. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step with me into an ancient courtyard, moonlight brushing against marble columns, the chatter of guests floating in the air. Platters of bread, figs, olives, and roasted meats are passed around, the scent of honey and wine mixing like some eternal perfume. And in the middle of it all sits a humble dish of greens, lettuce, arranged neatly, as though it held a significance far greater than a side garnish. To the Greeks, this wasn't just food. It was a signal, a symbol, a little nudge from culture itself whispering, slow down, let go, drift. Think about how today you might drink chamomile tea or turn on a white noise app to wind down. Back then, lettuce filled that role. It wasn't just about the crunch or the watery freshness. It was about the belief that these leaves carried with them the power to calm your body and prepare for rest. Ancient physicians described lettuce as cooling, not in the sense of putting on sunglasses and leaning on a convertible, but cooling as in draining away excess heat, energy, and desire. Lettuce was, in their minds, a plant that hushed a fire inside you. Picture the scene, a symposium, that Greek version of a frat party, but with more philosophy. The men drank heavily, argued over poetry, sang badly, and occasionally wrestled, because of course they did. At some point, when things were teetering between brilliance and chaos, someone would bring out lettuce, not to sober them up. No, the Greeks believed it would send them towards sleep. A lettuce intervention. You're full of wine, your cheeks warm, your mind buzzing, and then bam, lettuce lands in front of you like nature's off switch. It almost makes you smile, right? Today, after a wild night, you'd probably reach for a greasy burger or, let's be honest, maybe an ibuprofen and a gallon of water. But for the Greeks, a plate of greens was both medicine and myth. Some said it was Aphrodite herself who cursed lettuce, turning it into a plant of sleep and even sterility after her beloved Adonis died among its leaves. Others whispered that it calmed not just the body but the spirit, preparing a person for dreams or for silence. And that silence, oh, that's what they craved after the clamor of wine and words. They saw lettuce as a bridge, from a blazing fire Dionysian frenzy to the hushed shadows of Hypnos, the god of sleep. You chew. The leaves crackle softly, and soon your eyelids feel heavy. Not because of any proven sedative chemical, though modern science might argue for trace compounds, but because belief itself has a way of tucking you in. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine where those ancients must have sat, the night air brushing their skin, torches flickering, laughter fading. A platter of green leaves arrives, and suddenly the night tilts toward stillness. They didn't need melatonin gummies. They had lettuce. And as you lie here listening, maybe you feel a little sympathy for them. No matter the century, no matter the culture, humans have always searched for that gentle path into rest. For them, it was leaves. For you, it's stories like this. And in both cases, there's comfort in the ritual, the knowing that something, even something as small as lettuce, can carry you into the quiet. Now, imagine walking down a narrow Athenian street just after sunset. Oil lamps flicker in windows, casting warm halos on stone walls. The air smells faintly of olive oil and dust. In one home, a family gathers around a low table, and again, lettuce is present. It's not just party food. It's nightly fare associated with winding down the day. Even children are told, eat and you'll sleep better. Parents in every age invent bedtime tricks, don't they? You might get, brush your teeth or the cavity monsters will come. They got, eat your greens or you'll never rest. Slightly more poetic, slightly more manipulative, and yet the power of suggestion can't be underestimated. Picture yourself being told, night after night, that this one food leads to slumber. The crunch becomes a cue, like the sound of a lullaby. Your mind accepts it. Your body follows. The Greeks may not have known the science of serotonin or melatonin, but they understood the psychology of ritual. Some banquets even had sequences, meat and fish first, followed by dessert, and finally lettuce. The curtain call the meal. Guests who resisted might be teased for staying too heated or too lively. Social pressure worked hand in hand with custom. And so, lettuce was never just lettuce. It was part of choreography, the final bow before Hypnos swept everyone into his embrace. There's a small irony here, though. Lettuce itself is light, watery, sometimes even a little boring. You wouldn't think such a plain vegetable could carry so much cultural weight. But that's the beauty of human imagination. We take the simplest things and fill them with meaning. It's why a flower can symbolize love, or why a feather can symbolize hope. Lettuce became the emblem of sleep. And once an idea like that takes root, it spreads, just like vines across a garden wall. And here's where I give you a playful nudge. Next time you're grocery shopping, pushing that cart under fluorescent lights, consider tossing a head of lettuce and whispering to yourself, tonight, Hypnos dines with me. Sure, your fellow shoppers might glance at you funny, but hey, at least you'll be participating in a tradition older than Caesar salads and sandwich toppings. The Greeks would smile at that, I think. They would have recognized the gesture, even if they didn't recognize the plastic packaging. The night doesn't end. It only tilts like a cup half emptied, tilting closer to the table. You're still there with me in the glow of torches, and the Greeks are still passing around trays of food and pitchers of wine that glisten in the flame. The symposium, that carefully choreographed chaos of philosophy, laughter, arguments, and off-key singing, wasn't just a dinner. It was a stage. Every bite, every sip, every word belonged to a rhythm older than the marble beneath their feet. And when the music of voices grew too sharp, when the notes of wine and passion soared dangerously high, someone knew what had to be done. The servers would carry in bowls of lettuce. Yes, lettuce. Not figs dripping with honey. Not slices of lamb glazed with herbs. not another jug of wine. Lettuce. It came in cool, green leaves, stacked like quiet reminders that no revel can last forever. Imagine it. You've had 3 cups of wine already. Your cheeks are warm. You've been arguing loudly about whether Homer ever existed. And suddenly someone pushes a pile of leaves in front of you as though it were a reset button. If this were a modern dinner party, you'd laugh, maybe snap a picture, post it with the caption, "Friends say I need to chill." But here, in this world, no one laughs. They chew. The Greeks thought of lettuce as both the curtain and the lullaby of a meal. You didn't eat it at the beginning, when everyone was too eager for meat and conversation. You saved it for last, as though it could soothe the flames of wine and settle the sparks of desire. One writer even joked that lettuce was the nurse of drunken men. Think about that. Today you might grab an aspirin, a sports drink, maybe regret itself. They grabbed lettuce. A different kind of hangover prevention plan, one leaf at a time. You hear the crunch around the couches, soft as the crackle of logs in the courtyard brazier. Each bite is a promise that the night is winding down. Guests lean back, their voices growing rounder, slower, like waves calming after storm. If you've ever watched a party shift from wild laughter to hushed, sleepy murmurs, you've seen the same magic. But for them, the lettuce was a conductor, lowering the tempo, dimming the lights, cueing the dream sequence. And of course, not everyone believed it worked. Some men rolled their eyes, insisting they felt no different. Others swore they felt their limbs heavy, their minds drifting, as if Hypnos himself had stirred among the leaves. The gods must love lettuce, one might mutter, fighting off a yawn, and the others, nodding, would agree. After all, what better sign than a room full of yawns? There's a detail the historians still debate. Was lettuce brought out as a symbolic act, or was it genuinely believed to work? Maybe both. Maybe it didn't matter. Rituals have a way of shaping the body, simply because they shape the mind. If you tell yourself lettuce equals sleep, then by the second or third leaf, you'll feel your shoulders slump, whether or not the plant contains anything stronger than water. But in that dim courtyard, it didn't feel like suggestion. It felt like truth, because as the meal wound down and the moon dipped lower, the very air seemed to cool with the lettuce. Torches sputtered softly. The brazier burned low. The men reclined, bellies full, eyelids heavy, words fading into hums. And you, sitting there as a guest in the future, can't help but smile. You know they're just eating salad. But you also know they're right. Ritual has a power science can't quite measure. And in their world, where gods walked close and myths breathed beside men, a green leaf could be a doorway into dream. Someone in the corner laughs softly. Better eat, or you'll never find sleep tonight. Another guest nods, chewing dutifully. That's how it spread. From one banquet to another, from one household to the next. A habit, a story, a belief. Before long, lettuce wasn't just food. It was a closing act of Greek feasts. And maybe you picture it now. The last sounds of the night. A table clearing, sandals scraping stone as guests shuffle into the street. The host reclines, still chewing his final leaf, already half lost to sleep. The city outside is hushed, moonlight spilling like milk down narrow alleys. And in that moment, lettuce is not a vegetable. It is a spell, the softest of spells, one leaf at a time. The night air still clings to your skin, cool but heavy, like the last sigh of a party that has given all it can give. You wander from the courtyard into the hush of a chamber where scrolls line the walls, lamps flicker low, and men in long robes bend their heads over parchment. The Greeks were not content to leave lettuce as a party trick. No, they carried it into their medicine, scribbling its virtues into the annals of healing. And here, in this quieter space, you see lettuce reimagined, not just as a sleepy curtain call of symposium, but as a tool in a physician's kit. Hippocrates himself, the man we still call the father of medicine, was rumored to recommend lettuce for those who couldn't find rest. He would have told his patients, "Eat the leaf, sleep will follow." Simple advice, but then again, so is drink water and go outside, and somehow we still forget both. To Hippocrates, the body was a balance of humors, hot and cold, wet and dry. Lettuce, with its watery crunch and cooling nature, was the perfect antidote to heat, fever, and the burning restlessness of sleepless nights. Picture him scribbling in neat Greek. For the man whose eyes refuse to close, give him lettuce. Straightforward, clinical, almost like writing "take 2 pills before bed." And yet, lettuce wasn't just for sleep. Some healers said it could dampen desire, calming not just a racing mind but the body's hungers, too. Imagine being told by your doctor, "Sir, you're a bit too lively. Here, chew some lettuce." That's not exactly a prescription you'd expect at your local pharmacy, but in their world, it made perfect sense. The same cooling that eased fever could cool passions, quiet urges, slow the pulse of longing. One plant, one answer, for ailments of heat, both physical and metaphorical. Of course, not everyone agreed. Ancient writers left contradictory notes. Some praised lettuce as life-giving. Others warned it could weaken the spirit, even cause impotence. The debate was so lively that you can almost hear the arguments echoing through the centuries. It soothes the body. No, it saps the will. Eat more. Eat less. If you've ever read conflicting health blogs about whether coffee will save your life or end it, you've tasted the same flavor of confusion. Human advice has always been contradictory. It just used to arrive in scrolls instead of search results. Still, there's a certain poetry in the way lettuce appears in these texts. Galen, a physician centuries after Hippocrates, also wrote of lettuce as a cooling food. He prescribed it for headaches, for fevers, for restless minds. In his system of humors, lettuce belonged to the cooling, moistening group, meant to balance those who ran hot and dry. Imagine a worried mother bringing her sleepless child to Galen, who strokes his beard and says, "Yes, yes, lettuce will help." And the child, perhaps too young to argue, dutifully chews a leaf, tasting not just bitterness but reassurance. There's even a curious detail. Some healers warned against eating too much lettuce in the morning, lest it make you sluggish through the day. Sleepy mornings, lazy afternoons. That sounds suspiciously familiar, doesn't it? Like the food coma you get after too many pancakes. The Greeks, it seems, had their own version of car crash, and lettuce took the blame. But woven through all this advice is the same belief. Lettuce brings the body down from its peaks. If you are too heated, it cools you. If you are too restless, it slows you. If you are too desiring, it calms you. In every way, lettuce was an anchor, a plant that drew you back to the ground. And here's where the whispers of myth slip back in. Some claimed Adonis, beloved of Aphrodite, died among the beds of lettuce, and thus the plant became a symbol of sterility and death. Physicians picked up that thread, weaving myth into medicine, as if the fate of a god confirmed the science of men. Eat lettuce, they said, and you will sleep as Adonis slept, deeply, eternally. Perhaps not the most reassuring bedside manner, but the imagery was potent. You can almost imagine lying in a chamber where the oil lamp flickers and the physician leans over you, placing a bowl of greens at your side. He doesn't measure your pulse with a watch or order blood tests. He doesn't scold you for screen time. He simply hands you lettuce. You chew slowly, the taste slightly bitter, watery, earthy. Your eyes grow heavy, not because the plant holds a magic compound, but because the story around it convinces you it must. And as you rest there, lulled by the crunch, the knowledge that healers across centuries all agreed, or at least argued, about this one plant makes you smile. Because lettuce wasn't just dinner. It was diagnosis, prescription, cure. Some historians still argue over whether it truly worked or whether it was all ritual and suggestion. But maybe that's missing the point. Maybe what mattered was not whether lettuce chemically induced sleep, but whether it gave the restless mind permission to let go. Sometimes healing is not in the plant, but in the belief that the plant carries power. And if that belief softens your eyelids and stills your racing thoughts, then hasn't it healed you in its own way? So in the quiet chamber, as scrolls rustle and oil lamps gutter low, you feel yourself drawn deeper into their world. The physicians mutter their wisdom, the myths weave their threads, and the leaf itself rests in your hand. Humble, ordinary, extraordinary. And you know, without doubt, that in the eyes of the Greeks, lettuce was not just lettuce. It was medicine. It was myth. It was a night's final whisper before sleep. The story of lettuce doesn't begin in Athens. No, you trace its leaves backward, across the sea, through time, into the floodplains of the Nile where temples rose like stone giants and the sun pressed down like a furnace. Before the Greeks made lettuce their sleepy green, the Egyptians had already welcomed it into their gardens and their gods' altars. And in Egypt, lettuce was anything but sleepy. It was bold, sacred, charged with divine power. Walk with me through a temple courtyard, the walls painted with gods whose eyes follow you in still silence. Here, lettuce grows tall and upright, not soft and sprawling like the modern hedge you know. The Egyptians cultivated a variety that shot up like a spear, with thick stems oozing milky sap when cut. To them, that sap was no trivial detail. It was fertility, vigor, life force itself. Where the Greeks later saw sleep, the Egyptians saw the opposite. Virility, renewal, abundance. A plant that dripped with the promise of creation. It was sacred to Min, the god of fertility. Imagine statues of him, standing proud, lettuce stalks drawn beside him like divine companions. Priests offered the leaves during rituals, believing the plant carried the essence of procreation. Families whispered that eating lettuce would bless them with children. Farmers planted it not just for meals, but as a symbolic guarantee of growth in field and family alike. And then history does what history always does. Ideas travel. Traders carried seeds across the Mediterranean. Merchants exchanged goods and stories in ports that smelled of salt and fish, and soon lettuce found its way into Greek soil. But in the journey, something curious happened. The meaning shifted. The plant that was once fertility incarnate became, in Greek eyes, the leaf of sleep, sterility, and endings. It's almost funny, isn't it? The Egyptians saw vitality. The Greeks saw drowsiness. One culture praised lettuce for sparking desire. Another warned it could kill it. Same leaf, different story. Historians still debate why that happened. Was it because the Greeks grew different varieties, softer and milder than the Egyptian stalks? Or because myth demanded it? After all, if Adonis, lover of Aphrodite, died among lettuce beds, then surely the plant was cursed? Or maybe it was just cultural mood. Egyptians obsessed with beginnings, Greeks obsessed with balance and endings. A single plant, refracted through two civilizations, became a mirror of their souls. But don't imagine the Greeks simply borrowed and forgot. No, they carried Egyptian echoes in their myths. Aphrodite herself was sometimes linked with Egyptian goddesses, And Adonna's death among lettuce leaves may well have been an echo of old Nile rituals where gods were mourned and crops symbolized rebirth. You can almost see how stories tangled. A green plant that once promised fertility in one land became the grave marker desire in another. History is messy that way, always folding one meaning into another like layers of leaves in a head of lettuce. Picture it. An Athenian scholar, dusty from travel, kneeling in an Egyptian garden, watching priests harvest upright stalks with reverence. He returns home, plants seeds in Greek soil, and when the leaves spread low and broad instead of tall, he tells his friends, "This plant is different here. It cools the blood, it calms the body." And slowly, the Egyptian vigor softens into Greek drowsiness, a shift not just of geography, but of imagination. Still, the Egyptians never let go of their lettuce. Wall paintings and tombs show feasts where lettuce stood alongside bread and beer, eternal offerings for the dead. They believed it fed not only the living, but the souls beyond. So while the Greeks nibbled their lettuce at midnight feasts to drift into sleep, the Egyptians offered theirs to guide spirits into the afterlife. Two cultures, one leaf, both looking toward the threshold between life and something quieter. And you, standing with one foot in each world, can't help but marvel. How could the same plant mean virility in one language, sterility in another? How could a leaf be both a seed and an ending? Yet that's the charm of history. It reminds you that nothing is fixed, not even salad. Tonight, as you let these stories seep into you, you realize that lettuce has always been a traveler, a plant that crossed rivers and seas, that carried myths on its back like silent luggage. It sprouted in Nile soil with sap-like life, and it lay across Greek tables with whispers asleep. And in both places, it wasn't just food. It was a symbol, a story, a ritual that touched body and soul. And maybe, as you lie there listening, you feel yourself becoming part of that long journey. You don't just eat lettuce. You inherit its tales, fertility, sleep, beginnings, endings, all layered in the soft crunch of green. The Greeks may have transformed the plant, but the shadow of Egypt lingered, and in every leaf they chewed before drifting into sleep, there was still a trace of the Nile sun, still a hint of men's blessing, still a memory of sap like milk running from a broken stem. The night stretches on, and with it, the stories grow darker, softer, more tangled with myth. You're no longer in the courtyard of a symposium or the chamber of physician. You're stepping into the realm of whispers and tragedy, where gods walk among men and love ends in blood. And here, lettuce takes on its strangest role yet. No longer just a sleepy leaf of the feast, but a shroud of sorrow for Aphrodite, the goddess of love herself. You can almost feel the air change as you walk into the myth. The torches dim, the breeze stills, the laughter of the symposium fades away. In its place, the rustle of leaves, beds of lettuce, silent and green, stretching across a mythic garden. And lying there is Adonis, beloved of Aphrodite. Struck down in his youth, beauty extinguished too soon. The stories shift depending on who tells it. Sometimes at a wild boar, sometimes a jealous rival, sometimes fate itself, but the ending never changes. Adonis dies and Aphrodite's heart breaks. And where does he fall? Into the leaves of lettuce. That's the detail that clings like dew in the memory of Greece. The body of love's favorite mortal lying among plants that were once Egypt's symbol of fertility. For the Greeks, that sight transformed lettuce forever. It wasn't virility anymore. It wasn't beginnings. It was endings. It was sleep, the final kind. Imagine Aphrodite kneeling in the garden, her tears dampening the leaves, her hands clutching stems as though she could squeeze life back into them. Imagine the silence of the gods watching, the way even immortal hearts understood the cruelty of time. And in that moment, lettuce became not just food, not just medicine, but a grave marker, a plant forever tied to the fragility of love and the inevitability of rest. It's almost ironic, isn't it? The goddess of desire, the radiant Aphrodite, cursed with a lover who dies in a bed of plants that her people then associate with sterility. It's like the universe mocking her, the goddess who inspires longing, undone by leave that kill it. A cruel joke, and the Greeks loved their cruel jokes. They whispered it in their stories, painted it into their myths, taught it to their children as both warning and wonder. And from then on, lettuce became the plant of Aphrodite's mourning. Women might avoid it, fearing it would sap their fertility. Men might eat it reluctantly, muttering about strength fading with every bite. And yet, paradoxically, they still place it on their tables, still wove it into their rituals. That's the human way, isn't it? To hold on to symbols even when they frighten us. To eat the very thing we claim to mistrust, just because tradition whispers louder than fear. The myths are not unanimous, of course. Some say lettuce was sacred to Aphrodite long before Adonis' death, and that his fate only deepened the association. Others argue it was coincidence, a story embroidered over centuries. Historians still debate, sifting through fragments of poetry, bits of vase paintings, scraps of drama. Was lettuce truly the shroud of Adonis, or did later poets slip it in for dramatic flair? The truth may be lost, but the image is too powerful to ignore. You feel it even now, don't you? The way the garden grows, quiet when love dies. The way the leaves, once crisp and lively, become a bed for silence. Lettuce isn't just crunchy anymore, it's tragic. It carries with the weight of God's grief, the reminder that even beauty fades, even desire ends, even the brightest flame can fall into shadow. And yet, as always, there's a flicker of humor in the story, too. Imagine the Greeks, telling it around the fire, shaking their heads at the irony. Aphrodite, undone by lettuce. The goddess of love, cursed by salad. You almost want to laugh, until you realize that's exactly what they wanted. Tragedy and comedy, always two sides of the same leaf. So, as you lie here tonight, remember the strange image. A goddess kneeling in the garden, her tears dripping onto lettuce leaves, her lover gone. The plant that once promised life, now symbolizing death. And in the quiet, you understand why the Greeks never looked at lettuce the same way again. Because to them, it wasn't just food. It was memory. It was mourning. It was a shadow of Aphrodite's loss, served cold at the end of every feast, reminding everyone that joy fades, desire cools, and love, no matter how divine, always risks falling asleep among the leaves. The torches flicker lower, and the midst of Aphrodite's mourning fade into the hush of another kind of authority. Not the voice of gods, but a physician's. You follow me down a corridor lined with scrolls and clay jars of herbs, where the air smells faintly of dried leaves and lamp oil. Here, the name that still echoes across centuries waits to meet you. Hippocrates. The Greeks called him the father of medicine, and even now, his oath whispers across hospital halls, reminding doctors to do no harm. And in his world of humors, balances, and remedies drawn from the earth, lettuce had a special role. You imagine him sitting with a patient, perhaps a merchant complaining of sleepless nights, or a soldier restless after battle. The man stares at the floor, eyes shadowed, too tired to speak. Hippocrates listens, nods, and then gestures to a servant. No potion, no strange incantation, just lettuce. A simple plate set before the weary man. Eat, the physician might have said, and your body will cool, Your mind will soften, your eyes will close. And the man, desperate for relief, chews dutifully, feeling not just a crunch of leaves, but the weight of prescription. Because when a healer tells you something will work, it often does, even if the cure is only belief. Hippocrates believed the body was governed by 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile. Illness was imbalance, and food was the key to restoring harmony. Lettuce, with its moisture and cooling nature, belonged firmly on the side of calming remedies. It fought heat, it soothed fire, it pulled the body down from restless peaks. And so it became a nighttime ally, prescribed for the sleepless and the anxious, for those whose humors burned too brightly. But here's the twist. Lettuce didn't only calm. Some texts suggest Hippocrates also believed it could suppress desire, quieting the body's urges just as it softened the racing mind. Imagine being told by your doctor, "You're too excitable. Take lettuce twice a day and call me in the morning." It almost makes you laugh, doesn't it? Like being prescribed celery sticks for passion. Yet, in that world, the connection was logical. To cool the blood was to cool everything it carried. And here's where you catch a glimpse of the human side of Hippocrates. He wasn't just treating bodies. He was treating souls weighed down by life. The farmer too exhausted to rest. The mother unable to quiet her child. The soldier haunted by war. They all needed sleep, and lettuce was his answer. Maybe not the only one, but one that symbolizes entire philosophy. Nature itself holds the cures. If only you listen. Historians still debate how much Hippocrates really wrote about lettuce. Some fragments attribute the advice directly to him. Others suggest it came from later physicians who invoked his authority. But whether it was his hand or theirs, the image remains vivid. A healer in white robes, prescribing not a drug, not a ritual, but a leaf. Imagine being one of his patients, reclining in a simple room while the night pressed in through narrow windows. The healer places lettuce beside you. The oil lamp sputters. You chew slowly, the taste bitter and fresh. And as you swallow, your body accepts the story. You are cooling, you are calming, you are surrendering. The ritual works because it must. And as you lie there tonight, drifting with the same rhythm, you realize something profound. Hippocrates and his patients were no different from you, lying in the dark, hoping for rest. The centuries collapse, and you find yourself in their place, chewing a leaf, waiting for sleep, believing that the simplest things can still hold the greatest power. So, lettuce was not just a dish for the Greeks. Under Hippocrates, it became prescription, a ritual of healing. It cooled fevers, calmed the restless, softened desire, and led the weary into Hypnos' arms. And even though science has long since rewritten medicine, the story of lettuce lingers, a reminder that sometimes the smallest remedies carry the heaviest weight. Because in the end, what is sleep but surrender? And what is lettuce but a leaf that teaches surrender, one quiet bite at a time? The echo of Hippocrates' calm advice fades, but the world outside his chambers is never calm for long. You step out with me again into streets that ring with footsteps, shields clattering, voices raised in triumph or despair. Greece was a land of warriors as much as it was of poets, and for every scroll that spoke of lettuce as medicine, there were battlefields that told another story. Soldiers marched home from war weary and wounded, and when the feast began to honor their return, lettuce was waiting for them too, quiet, green, humbler than wine, but no less important. Picture it. The clang of bronze helmets piled in the corner, cloaks dusty with the dirt of distant lands, warriors reclining on couches with wine in hand. Victory tastes sweet, but it burns hot, and before long the wine flows faster than reason. Their laughter grows louder, their boasts bolder, until someone, perhaps a host wise enough to remember the night, must end, brings out lettuce. The leaves arrive not as decoration but as remedy, placed deliberately at the close of the meal. Soldiers, who once devoured meat like wolves, now chew reluctantly on greens. The bitterness cuts through the honey-thick wine. The crunch steadies their jaws. Slowly, inevitably, the night turns from fire to embers. And this wasn't just etiquette. The Greeks believed lettuce could balance the excesses of war and wine. Too much wine inflamed the body, heated the blood, made men reckless. Too much battle did the same. Lettuce was the antidote. Cool, calming, a reminder that not every victory must end in frenzy. To chew a leaf was to let go, to acknowledge that the sword must rest, the mind must soften, the body must surrender. You can almost hear the shift in the room. One soldier still brags about the enemy he slew, but his words are slower now, his hand heavy on the cup. Another yawns, eyes drooping, muttering that he'll dream of the battlefield again tonight. Someone across the table laughs. Then eat more lettuce, brother. It will keep the dreams gentle. A joke! Yes, but a sincere one. They believed it. They trusted it. And the truth is, lettuce probably did help, not by chemical sedative, but by ritual. When you fought, killed, survived, you carry fire in your bones. That fire doesn't fade just because the battle ends. You need a signal, something that says, the fight is over, the night has begun, the body may rest. For them, that signal was lettuce. For you, maybe it's brushing your teeth, scrolling through your phone one last time, or hearing this very voice. Different leaves, same ritual. The irony, of course, is delicious. Men who faced spears and blood were undone by salad. Mighty warriors, lulled not by armor or gods, but by a plate of greens. History loves its contradictions. And maybe you smile now, imagining the same men who once clashed with Persians or Spartans now chewing leaves with the solemnity of monks. But beneath the humor lies something tender. The Greeks understood that victory is hollow if you cannot rest. That wine without calm becomes poison. That war without peace breaks even the strongest. Lettuce was their way of giving soldiers permission to lay down their burdens, to step away from the clang of bronze and into the hush of sleep. Historians still argue about whether soldiers truly believed in lettuce's powers, or whether it was a convenient excuse to wind down. But the fragments of plays and texts don't lie. Lettuce was tied to recovery, to quiet after storm, to the slow dimming of fire. And as you lie here now, maybe you understand better than they did. Because in your world, too, battles rage, different weapons, different enemies, but the same restlessness after fight. And you, too, need someone to cool you, to steady you, to lead you back to yourself. So imagine reclining beside those Greek soldiers, your cup half empty, your eyes heavy. The leaves crackle between your teeth, their taste bitter but oddly comforting. Around you, laughter fades, voices soften, sandals shuffle as men slip away to bed, and you realize, in the end, sleep is the greatest victory and lettuce the humblest of allies. And as the room grows quiet, you drift with them, warriors, poets, healers, all held by the same truth. Even the strongest must one day surrender to the green hand of sleep. The sound of soldiers' laughter fades, and the scene shifts again, this time into the wooden tiers of a Greek theater, where the air smells of pine resin torches and crushed dust beneath sandals. You sit among a restless crowd waiting for the curtain of the day to fall and the chorus to begin. Here, let us find yet another stage, not on a table or in a doctor's chamber, but in the mouths of actors and the wit of playwrights. Because if there's one thing the Greeks loved almost as much as philosophy and wine, it was comedy. And nothing was too humble, too ordinary, to be turned into a joke. The playwright Aristophanes, the master of laughter and satire, knew the power of taking simple images and twisting them into something biting. Imagine the way lettuce could be mocked on stage. Not the proud sacred leaf of Egypt, nor the medicinal cure of Hippocrates, but a symbol of weakness, of laziness, of that sluggishness you feel when you've eaten too much or stayed up too late. Actors might stumble across the stage, clutching their stomachs, muttering about lettuce sapping their manhood. The audience roars because everyone knows the reputation. Lettuce makes you sleepy. Lettuce makes you soft. Lettuce is for those who cannot keep up. It became shorthand, a punchline. Want to imply a character is impotent? Give him lettuce. Want to mock someone for being lethargic? Compare them to a man stuffed full of greens. It's not far from modern jokes about warm milk before bed, or the stereotype that a salad isn't a real meal. Humor finds its targets in the ordinary, and lettuce was ordinary enough to hit home every time. Yet, as with all comedy, the jokes carried truth. People genuinely believed lettuce cooled desire, genuinely feared it dulled the spirit. The stage simply exaggerated what the symposium already whispered. A man who chose lettuce over meat became the butt of a joke, not only because it was funny, but because it reflected an anxiety everyone shared. What if this leaf really robs me of my strength? Comedy, after all, is just fear wrapped in laughter. You can almost hear it. The chorus chanting in sing-song voices, mocking some pompous character by calling him lettuce-hearted. The audience roars, slapping their knees, spilling wine, recognizing themselves in humor. They laugh. But when the play ends and the night grows quiet, they still chew the leaves at supper, still fear the stories of Aphrodite and Adonis, still wonder whether the joke is half-truth. The theater wasn't only laughter. Tragedians, too, sometimes drew on lettuce as symbol. Imagine a scene where a mother laments her son's wasted strength, comparing him to wilted leaves, or a lover describing passion fading. Like lettuce left too long in the sun. In both comedy and tragedy, the plant carried weight. It was cultural shorthand for endings, weakness, rest. A leaf, yes, but also a metaphor anyone could understand the moment it appeared on stage. Historians still debate how often lettuce truly appeared in these works. Fragments survive, jokes preserved in commentaries, references hidden in scholia. But the pattern is clear. Lettuce was not just food. It was symbol, it was metaphor, it was stage prop. A reminder that culture itself had absorbed the plant into its bloodstream so thoroughly that it could be used for laughter, for sorrow, for satire. Think about it in modern terms. Imagine a play today where a character is mocked for drinking decaf coffee. You laugh, not because decaf is inherently funny, but because everyone knows the associations: dullness, weakness, lack of energy. Lettuce was their decaf coffee, their shorthand for a life without spark. And just as you might roll your eyes at someone who orders decaf after dinner, the Greeks rolled theirs at someone who reached too eagerly for lettuce. And yet, even as you laugh, you see the tenderness underneath. The jokes wouldn't land if the plant didn't matter. Lettuce wasn't just a random vegetable. It was embedded in ritual, medicine, myth. It carried weight, which made the punchline sting sweeter. So, as you sit there in the theater, the chorus dancing, the actors mocking, the crowd roaring, you feel the strange duality again. Lettuce is cure, lettuce is curse, lettuce is comedy. Always shifting, always meaningful, always just one step away from sleep. And when the play ends, the audience rises, still laughing, still murmuring, still carrying the image of lettuce in their minds. They walk home through dark streets, and perhaps, just before bed, they chew a leaf, laughing at themselves, half afraid of what the chorus sang, half comforted that even in their weakness, they are part of the story. Because lettuce was more than a punchline. It was a quiet leaf that lived in every Greek household, every feast, every stage. It was a mirror in which they saw themselves, laughing, grieving, eating, sleeping. And tonight, you too are sitting in that audience, laughing softly in the dark, chewing on the thought of lettuce, and drifting toward the same sleep that claimed them. The theater crowd disperses, sandals scuffing against stone, the laughter fading into night. And as you drift forward in time, you find yourself not in Athens anymore, but in Rome, a city that swallowed Greece whole and yet somehow never stopped borrowing its stories, its myths, its foods. Lettuce, that humble green leaf, crossed the sea along with philosophy and gods, finding itself reborn in marble courtyards and Roman gardens. If the Greeks had whispered about sleep, the Romans shouted about health, and one man in particular left his voice inked into the parchment of history, Pliny the Elder. Pliny loved cataloging the world, writing as though one could capture the entirety of nature with enough ink and discipline. In his natural history, he gave lettuce a starring role, not just as food, but as remedy, cure, and marvel. For Pliny, lettuce wasn't some punchline in a comedy. It was medicine cabinet, pantry, and philosopher's tool rolled into one. He wrote that it could soothe the stomach, ease the mind, quiet the nerves, and even sharpen the appetite if eaten at the right time. Lettuce was, in his eyes, an everyday miracle. And here's the strange part. While the Greeks emphasized lettuce as cooling and sleep-inducing, the Romans added layers. They believed it could both calm and energize, depending on how and when it was eaten. Eat lettuce at night, Pliny advised, and it would carry you into restful slumber. Eat it in the morning, and it would refresh you, shake off fatigue, prepare you for the day. The same plant, two opposite effects. Like coffee that wakes you in one dose and lulls you in another. You can almost hear Pliny scribbling in excitement. See? This proves nature is cleverer than we are. Romans took it seriously. Banquets in Rome often began with lettuce, not ended like in Greece. The order mattered. Serve at the start. It was meant to open the appetite, clear the system, prepare the stomach for the onslaught of meats, sauces, and wines. By contrast, if you ate it at the end, it acted as a sedative, closing the body down. 2 rolls, 1 leaf. It was the Swiss Army knife of Roman dining. And of course, Romans being Romans, they exaggerated. Stories spread of emperors who swore by lettuce for their health. Augustus, it was said, recovered from illness by obeying his doctor's lettuce-heavy diet. Whether true or not, the tale stuck, and soon lettuce became imperial food, a dish of both peasants and Caesars. Imagine dining beside Augustus, his plate as green as yours, both of you chewing solemnly as if the fate of the empire depended on it. Pliny even described varieties, some tall, some curled, some bitter, some mild, each with their own properties. He wrote their sap, their seeds, their uses and poultices. For him, lettuce was not just salad, it was science. And as you picture him writing, you see the Romans tending gardens behind their villas, rows of lettuce lined neatly, ready for table and temple alike. But even here, contradictions bloomed. Some Romans warned that too much lettuce weakened the body. Others insisted it strengthened it. It was the same old debate the Greeks had, only louder, because Romans loved debate almost as much as they loved conquest. One man's cure was another man's curse, and lettuce became the battlefield. Still, the consensus leaned toward reverence. Lettuce was offered at meals, used in medicine, praised by writers, planted in gardens. It had traveled from Egypt's sacred stalks to Greece's sleepy leaves, and now to Rome's encyclopedic curiosity. And in every stage it adapted, shifting shape like a chameleon, absorbing the meanings each culture needed it to bear. You can almost see the arc. In Egypt, lettuce was fertility. In Greece, it was sleep and sterility. In Rome, it was versatility, both start and finish, both energy and rest. The plant had grown up, matured, become a citizen of the empire. And as you sit there now, listening in a hush, you realize that lettuce is a little like history itself. Plain on the surface, but layered underneath. The Romans saw that. Pliny wrote it. And now, 2,000 years later, you're still chewing on it. Not the leaf, but the story, crunchy and cool, still carrying you closer to sleep. The Roman streets fade behind you, and suddenly the world is softer, quieter. You find yourself in a garden, not a battlefield or a banquet hall. The midday sun filters through trellises heavy with vines, and stone benches wait beneath fig trees. Somewhere, a fountain murmurs, scattering light in tiny arcs. And here, too, lettuce grows, neatly planted rows, pale green heads glistening in the heat. But it isn't only in the soil. No, look closer. It's in the paintings on villa walls, in the carvings on marble reliefs, in the little details of art where leisure and sleep entwine. The Greeks and Romans didn't just eat lettuce. They imagined themselves surrounded by it, even in rest. Archaeologists have uncovered frescoes where banquet scenes end with platters of lettuce, carried by servants, a visual reminder of the night's gentle conclusion. Sculpture sometimes showed reclining figures holding not wine cups, but leaves or stalks, as if to say, here lies a moment between revelry and rest, the twilight of the feast. Picture one such fresco in a villa at Pompeii. A painted man reclines on a couch, eyes half closed, one hand draped lazily across his chest, the other reaching for a leaf of lettuce on a table beside him. The gesture isn't heroic. It isn't even particularly dramatic. It's ordinary. And that's what makes it powerful. An acknowledgement that even in the heart of empire, even in a city of marble and ambition, people long for quiet endings. Writers, too, captured this imagery. Some describe men slipping into afternoon naps in shaded gardens, bellies heavy with food, a stalk of lettuce still in hand like a makeshift pillow. You can almost laugh at the image. Warriors of Rome, conquerors of nations, nodding off in the lettuce patch. But isn't that just the truth of humanity? That even the mighty need naps, and even emperors surrender to sleep in the garden? The symbolism wasn't lost on philosophers. They wrote of lettuce as the plant of endings, the food of closure, the bridge between activity and stillness. To walk among lettuce in the garden was to prepare for calm. To recline with it at the end of a meal was to acknowledge mortality itself. The small death of sleep, the nightly rehearsal for the greater silence to come. Some plays even use the image of men lying in lettuce beds as shorthand for idleness or decline. A joke, yes, but also a truth. The garden was both refuge and reminder. And think of it. The Greeks already had Hypnos, the god of sleep, imagined with wings sprouting from his temples. To add lettuce to that imagery was almost poetic. Nature itself offering Hypnos a bed of green to soften his nightly work. In art, you sometimes glimpse this overlap. Quiet figures reclining among plants, their bodies slack, their faces serene. The leaf becomes more than food. It becomes a frame, a cradle, a symbol that rest is not indulgence, but necessity. You walk deeper into this imagined garden. The heat presses down, but the fountain whispers coolness, and the air carries the faint, watery scent of crushed lettuce leaves. Somewhere nearby, a man snores gently, stretched on a bench. Sandals fall into the ground. In his lap rests a half-eaten leaf. No one mocks him. No one wakes him. In this space, sleep is sacred and lettuce is its herald. Historians still debate how literal this imagery was. Were these naps in gardens truly common, or were they idealized, painted fantasies of leisure? Perhaps both. But whether real or imagined, the art tells us something profound. People wanted to be remembered not just for wars or speeches, but for moments of rest. They wanted to be painted in the act of surrendering to quiet. And lettuce, ordinary humble lettuce, was chosen as a companion of that moment. And you, lying here now, understand why. Because even in your own world, you crave images of peace, a hammock swaying, a blanket pulled close, a cat curled on your chest. The ancients simply chose lettuce as their backdrop, their symbol, their lullaby in paint and stone. So when you close your eyes tonight, imagine yourself there, in the garden, sunlight dappling your skin, the fountain humming, the leaves cool beneath your fingertips. You're not a warrior, not a philosopher, not a guest at a feast. You're simply a body at rest, watched over by the quietest of plants. And in that stillness, you realize the art was never really about lettuce. It was about the human desire to pause, to be cradled, to be remembered not for striving but for surrender. And that is a truth as eternal as marble. The garden's hush lingers, but when you step back into the streets, the silence unravels into chatter. Athens, Rome, every city of the ancient world thrummed with voices. Markets buzzing, symposiums roaring, neighbors leaning over walls to swap the latest tales. And lettuce, of all things, had become one of those tales. Not just food, not just medicine, not even just symbol. It was gossip. It was rumor. It was the kind of thing whispered half seriously, half jokingly, until everyone believed it, or at least pretended to. You hear it first in the market. A woman selling herbs mutters to a customer, "Don't let your husband eat too much lettuce, or he'll sleep instead of—" She trails off, raising her eyebrows. The customer laughs, but you see her frown as she walks away, tucking that thought in the back of her mind. A leaf that cools the body might also cool the bed. Rumor born in whispers, carried in baskets of greens. Then, in the symposium, it takes another form. Men recline on couches, cups in hand, debating whether lettuce is blessing or curse. One insists it helps him sleep, without the pounding head from too much wine. Another snorts and says, "Yes, but it also saps your strength. My wife swears I become as limp as the leaves themselves." The table erupts in laughter, but beneath it hums a nervous recognition. Every joke hides a truth someone has lived, and so lettuce became double-edged. On the one hand, praise for calming fevers, easing headaches, soothing restlessness. On the other, fear for draining virility, weakening resolve, turning lions into lambs. Writers recorded both sides, never agreeing, always circling. One poet even quipped that lettuce was the friend of Hypnos and the enemy of Eros. Sleep's ally loves betrayer. It stuck the way clever lines always do. You can almost hear the rhythm of rumor spreading like wildfire. A mother warns her daughter, "Too much lettuce and your husband will lose his spark." A healer insists, "Nonsense, it will bring him balance." A philosopher muses, "Perhaps both are true, depending on the man." The debates weave through homes, plays, feasts, temples, until lettuce isn't just a vegetable but a personality trait. To eat it is to make a statement about yourself. Even emperors weren't immune. Stories tell of Caesar Augustus swearing by lettuce for his health, eating it daily. Admirers pointed his recovery as proof of its powers. Critics, though, muttered about weakness, about frailty. Was the great Augustus strong because of lettuce? Or despite it, the gossip didn't care. It spread anyway, shaping reputations with every retelling. And still historians argue. Was lettuce truly linked to sterility, or was that just cultural anxiety given leafy form? Did Aphrodite's mourning seal its fate, or did the medical theories of cooling and humors twist its reputation? No one agrees, because rumor doesn't need truth. Rumor only needs repetition. Think of it in your world. Coffee makes you alert. Turkey makes you sleepy. Chocolate makes you romantic. None of these claims are entirely accurate, but they're passed around anyway, absorbed into culture until they feel real. Lettuce was that kind of story for the ancients. A food, yes, but more importantly, a talking point. And as you listen to voices, merchants, philosophers, soldiers, lovers, you realize that the plant's true power wasn't chemical at all. It was social. It shaped how people thought of each other, how they judged strength and weakness, how they teased, how they worried. Lettuce was a mirror, reflecting the insecurities and hopes of those who ate it. So tonight, as you lie here drifting, imagine yourself leaning into those whispered conversations. One ear catches laughter, the other catches worry. And you realize that rumor is as timeless as sleep. The Greeks and Romans gossiped about lettuce the way people now gossip about diets, superfoods, and miracle cures. Different words, same hunger for stories. And when you finally close your eyes, you carry with you that gentle hum of voices, half-truths, jokes, warnings, all wrapped around the same green leaf. Lettuce. The gossip that never wilted. The story that grew each time it was passed along, until it became part of the very air of antiquity. The market voices fade, and you wander instead into a shaded courtyard where philosophers gather. Their robes hang loose in the warm air, and scrolls lie scattered at their feet. Here, there is no clamor of gossip, no drunken laughter, no merchants hawking wares. Instead, there is stillness, the kind of stillness that comes when men think too hard and speak too softly, their words winding like smoke toward the sky. And in this quiet, lettuce finds another role. Not medicine, not gossip, not myth. Now it becomes metaphor. Picture a philosopher reclining on a stone bench, plucking a leaf from a bowl beside him. He holds it up for his students to see, pale veins glowing in the afternoon light. This, he says, is the symbol of moderation. He tears it gently, the sound crisp, almost like parchment. Too much wine, and you are inflamed. Too much desire, and you are consumed. Lettuce, he gestures, cools both. It teaches restraint. The students nod, scribbling, chewing on both the leaf and the idea. For philosophers, lettuce was a convenient shorthand. It embodied the balance they sought in all things, the middle path, the harmony of hot and cold, wakefulness and sleep. To eat lettuce at the end of the feast was not just a ritual. It was a lesson in temperance. The body must cool. The spirit must rest. Passion must yield to reason. In that way, the leaf became more than food. It became philosophy served on a plate. Some thinkers took it further. They warned that too much lettuce, too much cooling, could lead to weakness. The wise man, they argued, knows when to eat and when to abstain. The leaf became a symbol of the fine line between moderation and excess. You could imagine a Stoic using it as an example. Eat lettuce if you must, but do not cling to it. Do not fear it. Use it as nature intended, and move on. The plant became an emblem of the Stoic worldview, Simple, humble, sufficient. Others, perhaps with a smile tugging at their lips, mock those who relied on it too much. You lie in lettuce beds, one philosopher joked to another, meaning you live in idleness, letting the cool leaf smother your fire. It was both insult and warning. A life too calm risks becoming stagnant. The garden, in that sense, could be both haven and trap. And you, sitting there among them, can feel the weight of the metaphor. The leaf in your hand is no longer just crunchy and bland. It's a lesson. Do not burn too brightly. Do not cool too far. Balance is everything. Eat, but not too much. Rest, but not forever. Desire, but not without reason. Lettuce is a teacher, subtle and green, whispering moderation into every bite. Historians still puzzle over these fragments. How many of these sayings were real? How many exaggerated later by commentators? But whether or not Plato or Aristotle ever mused over lettuce directly doesn't matter. The fact is their students, their followers, their imitators did. And the plant carried philosophy the way it carried sap, flowing quietly, unseen, but always present. Think of your own life. Don't you also use food as metaphor? Bread as daily sustenance, wine as joy, coffee as survival. Lettuce was theirs. It wasn't about vitamins or calories. It was about meaning. To speak of lettuce was to speak of restraint, of the slow passage from passion to calm, of the wisdom in letting the fire cool. So tonight, as you lie here, imagine yourself reclining in that courtyard. A philosopher's voice hums low in your ear, the leaf trembling in his fingers. You chew slowly, tasting not just the plant but the idea behind it. The world is always asking you to burn brighter, to want more, to move faster. But lettuce, the philosopher says, tells you otherwise. Slow down, cool, rest, sleep, and maybe you smile because it's funny in its simplicity. A plant as teacher, a salad as sermon. Yet isn't it the most human thing of all? To find wisdom in the ordinary, to see philosophy in the crunch of a leaf? So you close your eyes, the philosopher's words still echoing, balance, restraint, rest. And you realize that sometimes wisdom doesn't come in grand speeches or carved stone. Sometimes it comes in lettuce. The philosopher's courtyard dissolves, and the centuries tilt forward like pages turning in a heavy book. You drift past the fall of empires, to the quiet spread of Christianity, and into the hushed, candlelit world of medieval Europe. Stone abbeys rise where marble temples once stood. Bells toll instead of lyres. The chatter of symposiums is replaced by the chanting of monks. But look closely and you'll see it. Lettuce still present, still green, still whispering the same stories of sleep and rest. The Greeks and Romans may be gone, but their leafy companion has slipped quietly into the gardens of monasteries. Picture a cloistered garden in the 9th century. Narrow beds of herbs stretch along gravel paths. Sage, rosemary, fennel, mint, and in the center, rows of lettuce. The monks tend them with quiet devotion, watering them carefully, noting their growth in herbal manuscripts. To the monastic mind, lettuce was no trivial crop. It was medicine, a remedy for the body, a symbol of humility. While kings feasted on roasted meats and spice wines, monks dined on bread, beans, and greens. And lettuce, cool and plain, fit perfectly with the ideals of simplicity and restraint. Medical texts of the Middle Ages, many copied and recopied from ancient Greek sources, still praise lettuce for its cooling qualities. The belief had not died with Hippocrates or Pliny. It survived, inked into Latin manuscripts illuminated with vines and gold leaf. Lactuca, they wrote, brings sleep to the restless. Doctors in medieval towns recommended it to those troubled by fevers, headaches, or passions too fierce. The Greeks' humors became the medieval four temperaments, but the diagnosis was the same. Heat must be cooled, fire must be softened, lettuce must be eaten. And here's where the irony grows sweeter. In Egypt, lettuce had been linked to fertility. In Greece, to sterility and death. In Rome, to balance and appetite. And in medieval Europe, it became almost holy, a symbol of humility, temperance, and the quiet life. Priests preached moderation, and lettuce was moderation in edible form, a leaf that neither inflamed nor intoxicated, but simply calmed. In some texts, it was even recommended before evening prayers, so that the body might be still, the mind ready for contemplation. Imagine a monk bent over parchment, scratching notes in the dim light of a tallow candle. Lettuce, eaten at night, brings soft sleep. Outside, the wind moans through the cloister arches, but inside, the air is calm. Supper has ended. The brethren had chewed their leaves in silence, and now the only sound is the scrape of quills and the soft shuffle of sandaled feet. Lettuce is no longer Aphrodite's grief or Pliny's remedy. It is a companion of prayer, a gift of the garden that eases men into both sleep and devotion. Yet, even among monks, rumor never dies. Whispers linger that lettuce could dull the body too much, making men sluggish in their duties. Some abbots warned against overindulgence. Eat enough to rest, but not so much that you slumber in your psalms. Too much calm, after all, was laziness. And in monasteries, laziness was a sin. Once again, lettuce carried its double edge, comfort and caution, blessing and warning. And outside the cloisters, in the villages, the same beliefs trickled down. Peasants grew lettuce in their cottage gardens, passed down the same advice. Eat it for rest, for cooling, for calming the blood. Mothers fed it to children who tossed and turned. Wives teased husbands who grew too fond of it. Healers plucked its leaves by moonlight, muttering prayers as they ground it into remedies. Lettuce wasn't just food. It was woven into the fabric of life, a link in a long chain stretching back to Greece, Rome, Egypt. Historians still debate just how much of this was medical truth and how much was superstition. But the manuscripts, the recipes, the sermons, they're there, leafing quietly through the centuries. Lettuce had survived the collapse of empires, carried not by armies but by farmers, monks, mothers, and healers. It didn't conquer. It endured. So tonight, as you lie here with a candle of imagination flickering low, you see lettuce not as a Greek curiosity or Roman remedy, but as a pilgrim, a leaf that walked across time, planted in one empire after another, settling in cloisters, kitchens, and manuscripts. Always humble, always ordinary, yet always meaningful. And maybe you realize with a drowsy smile that lettuce has never just been food. It has always been a story carried on the breath of priests and poets, healers and jesters. A story that stretched from the Nile to Athens, from Rome to the monasteries, and now, somehow, all the way to you. The monastery bells fade into silence, and with them the whispers of medieval healers. The parchment closes, the ink dries, and you drift forward again, centuries tumbling past like falling leaves, until you land in a world humming with laboratories, microscopes, and the word machines. Now, the voices are not those of philosophers or monks, but of scientists in white coats, measuring compounds, running tests, frowning at charts. And yes, believe it or not, they, too, have bent their gaze toward lettuce. The ancients weren't completely wrong. Hidden inside the veins of lettuce is a bitter white sap called lacticarium. When cut, the plant bleeds this milky substance, and for centuries people have whispered that it carries mild sedative powers. Some called it lettuce opium, not because it could rival the poppy, but because it seemed to nudge the mind toward calm. In the 19th century, doctors even tried to use it as a gentle sleep aid, prescribing extracts of patients who couldn't rest. It never became mainstream. Its effects were too mild, too inconsistent. But the very fact that scientists tried shows how deeply the old belief lingered. Modern research has poked at this sap, analyzing the compound within. Lactucin, lactocopicrin, names that sound like spells from a wizard's book but are, in truth, bitter chemicals that may interact with the nervous system. Some small studies suggest they can act as analgesics, dulling pain, or as mild sedatives, calming restlessness. Nothing strong enough to knock you out. Don't go throwing away your pillow sprays and herbal teas, but just enough to echo the whispers of Hippocrates and Pliny. Is it placebo? Partly, yes. But the body doesn't always draw sharp lines between belief and biology. If chewing a few leaves, coupled with a story you've heard since childhood, helps your shoulders loosen and your eyelids grow heavy, then what does it matter whether the chemistry is strong or not? Healing often lives in the space between ritual and reality. The Greeks called it cooling the humors. We call it neurotransmitters. Different words, same effect. The body surrenders. And here's the delicious irony. For centuries, physicians and playwrights argue whether lettuce made men weak or strong, whether it dulled or healed. Modern science answers with a shrug. Both are sort of true. Lettuce won't sap your strength, but will slow you just enough. Not a knockout blow, not a magic cure, just a whisper to the nervous system. Hush, rest. Let go. Historians of medicine note how rare it is for a belief to endure so long without evidence. Think of all the remedies lost to time, all the cures abandoned when science caught up. Yet lettuce survived. From Egyptian temples to Greek symposiums, from Roman gardens to medieval cloisters, from quills to microscopes, it carried its reputation like a stubborn rumor. And when modern researchers finally cut into its veins, they found something there, faint but real, a whisper hidden in the sap. Picture yourself now, not in an ancient courtyard, but in a sterile lab. The hum of machines replaces the buzz of cicadas. A scientist bends over a petri dish, latex gloves gleaming under fluorescent lights. They slice a lettuce stem, and the milky sap oozes out. It's measured, tested, spun in glass vials. The verdict? A mild sedative, a trace of truth in the old tales. And you can almost imagine Hypnos himself leaning over the scientist's shoulder, smiling faintly. I told you so. But here's the thing. Science also reminds us of scale. You'd have to eat a mountain of lettuce to feel any measurable sedative effect. A salad bowl won't replace a sleeping pill. And yet, the act of eating, the ritual, the story, it matters. Sometimes a leaf doesn't need to be strong. It just needs to be believed. The placebo becomes lullaby, and the body obeys. So as you lie here tonight, you're not chewing lettuce, but you're hearing its story. And maybe that's the real sedative. The knowledge that for thousands of years, people have turned to this humble plant for comfort, for rest, for permission to close their eyes. Science confirms a hint of truth, but tradition carried the weight long before. And isn't that what most of life is? Truth and story woven together? The leaf has always been both. Chemistry and myth, sap and symbol. Together, they guide you to the same place. A softer heartbeat, a slower breath, a body ready to slip beneath the surface of wakefulness. So let the scientists keep their microscopes and charts. Tonight, you hold the older wisdom in your mind, a leaf, a story, a whisper that the world is ready to let you rest. The lamps of the laboratory dim, the white coats vanish, and you find yourself back where you began, alone in a quiet room, the night pressing gently at your window. The story has traveled so far, from Egyptian temples to Greek symposiums, from Roman gardens to medieval cloisters, from the scribbles of Pliny to the notes of modern scientists. And now it rests here with you, one listener, one story, one leaf still whispering. You think back to how it all began. A platter at the end of a Greek feast, leaves glistening in torchlight, laughter fading as the night drew down. Lettuce carried them toward Hypnos, the god of sleep, just as surely as your ritual carries you now. You remember Aphrodite grieving over Adonis among lettuce beds, her sorrow turning the plant into a symbol of endings. You remember Hippocrates scribbling in his quiet chamber, prescribing lettuce for restless patients. You remember Pliny's enthusiasm, monks' careful gardens, rumors spreading in markets, philosophers plucking leaves as metaphors, scientists slicing stems for hidden truths. All those voices, all those centuries, and yet, when you hold in your mind, it is only a leaf, pale, cool, simple, the kind of thing you'd pass over in a salad bowl without a thought. And yet it has carried more meaning than marble statues, more endurance than kings and empires. Let it survive because it spoke to something everyone knew, the longing for rest, the universal desire to lay burdens down, the hush of fire, to let go. So tonight, the story belongs to you. You're not reclining at a symposium or lying in a monk's cell. You're here in your own space, with your own rituals. Pillows fluffed, lights dimmed, the hum of fan in the background. The ancients had their lettuce. You have your story. Both are bridges into the same silence. The voices of history soften now. The philosophers stop debating. The gossip quiets. The chorus ends its mocking song. Even the scientists put away their notes, their microscopes dark. What remains is only the hush of gardens in moonlight, the hush of courtyards after feasts, the hush of abbeys where monks slip into prayerful sleep. You are part of that hush now, another body, another soul, finding your way into the arms of night. The images begin to blur. You see a torch flicker, then fade. You hear the crackle of leaves chewed at a symposium, and it becomes the rustle of your sheets. You feel the cool sap of lettuce on your tongue, and it becomes the cool air on your skin. The boundaries dissolve. The story dissolves. You're left only with a feeling, soft, cooling, steady. And you know, as your breath slows, that this has always been a lesson. Sleep is not a weakness, but a gift. Lettuce was never truly about sterility or fertility, about strength or frailty. It was about permission, a signal, a leaf that told weary humans, you may rest now. So take that permission with you. Let your shoulders sink into the bed. Let your eyes grow heavy. Let your mind wander down those ancient streets one last time until even the columns and statues blur into shadow. You are walking with the Greeks, reclining with the Romans, chanting with the monks, dreaming with all of them. A single, timeless act. Closing your eyes, the story quiets, the leaf fades, and only sleep remains. Now breathe slowly, deeply. Feel the rhythm soften. Let the words stretch out like threads dissolving into darkness. There is nothing left to hold on to, nothing left to resist. The night is wide, and you are ready to fall into it. Good night, my friend. Good night across centuries. Good night across leaves and myths. End of script. Sweet dreams.